I remember the exact temperature of the car seat when my mother picked me up from St. Michael's Hospital on March 14th. Cold, plastic, clinical, 63 degrees according to the dashboard display because I noticed everything that day. My hands were shaking still, not from weakness, but from the kind of adrenaline that comes from surviving something your body wasn't supposed to survive. The pneumonia had taken 3 weeks, 21 days of IV lines and oxygen masks, and the constant beep of machines that told me I was still alive. Beep, still here, beep, still breathing. My mother hadn't slept in the hospital once. She'd sat in that plastic chair next to my bed every single night, her face getting thinner, her fingers getting colder, until finally the doctors said I could go home. I was 28 years old. I had my own apartment, a real apartment, not some shared dorm situation. It was a 3-bedroom in the Arts District of Portland, the kind of place that took me 5 years to save for. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub where I'd spent hundreds of nights reading and thinking and planning my life. The apartment was supposed to be my sanctuary. My mother drove with both hands on the wheel, the way she always did when she was worried about something. The radio played softly. Rain hit the windshield. Everything felt like it was moving through water. "Your father wanted to come," she said at a red light. "But he had back-to-back meetings. He sends his love." I didn't respond. I was thinking about my bed, how the sheets would smell like me, how I'd spent so long in a hospital bed that I'd forgotten what my own mattress felt like. "Stephanie called twice while you were sleeping," my mother continued. "She said she wanted to do something special for your homecoming. She's been so worried about you, honey. We all have." Stephanie is my sister, younger by 4 years. We'd always been close in that way where you're close because you share DNA and a childhood, not necessarily because you have much in common as adults. She was the social one, the beautiful one, the one who married young and had kids and joined the PTA and somehow made all of it look effortless. I was the career woman, the one who studied too hard and worked too late and didn't make time for dadding because I was too busy building something real. But we loved each other. That part was never in question. Until it was. The apartment building was quiet when we arrived. My mother parked in the visitors section, and I took my time getting out of the car. My lungs still felt like they were coated in something thick. Each breath required thought. My doctor had said it would take another month before I felt normal again. Maybe 2. I had packed a bag before going to the hospital. Simple things. Work clothes I wouldn't be wearing for at least 2 weeks. Underwear, 2 pairs of jeans, my favorite sweater. Everything was exactly where I'd left it, except my apartment door was unlocked. I remember my mother noticing it at the same time I did. Our eyes met. The door was definitely locked when I left for my emergency room visit. I was paranoid about things like that. I'd checked twice. "Maybe Stephanie is here," my mother said, but she said it like a question. She wasn't just here. She had made herself at home. My apartment smelled different, like perfume and vanilla candles in someone else's life. My living room had been rearranged. The couch, my couch, that I'd bought at an estate sale for $200 was pushed against a different wall. My books were moved. My record collection was disturbed. But none of that registered as clearly as the sight of my bedroom. The door was open. My mother walked to it first. I remember her stopping in the doorway, her shoulders going rigid. Stephanie's luggage was in my room, 2 large suitcases, an open cosmetics bag on my dresser. Her clothes were hanging in my closet, pushed in among my things. My sheets, the ones I'd washed before the hospital because I was planning to enjoy them when I got home, were wrinkled, obviously slept in. She was there, in my house, in my bed. "Oh," my mother said quietly. "Oh, I see." I couldn't speak. The words were forming, but they weren't making it to my mouth. I was supposed to feel relief coming home. I was supposed to feel safe. Instead, I felt like I was trespassing in my own life. "Stephanie," my mother called out. "Stephanie, honey." She emerged from my bathroom like she owned it. Stephanie always had that quality, the ability to appear in a room like she'd been invited specifically. Her hair was down. She was wearing one of my cardigans, the expensive one from that boutique on Morrison Street. "Oh my God," she said, her face doing that thing where it shifts instantly into concern. "You're home. Mom, you didn't tell me you were picking her up today." "The discharge was scheduled for this morning," my mother said, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. "We discussed this last week at dinner." "Right, yes, of course." Stephanie was already moving toward me, her arms opening for a hug. "I'm so glad you're home. How are you feeling? You look so pale. Are you getting enough rest?" I stepped back. I didn't mean to do it consciously. My body just moved. The way a small animal moves away from something it senses might hurt it. "What are you doing in my room?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, smaller than I wanted it to sound. Stephanie's face did something complicated. A pause, then a smile. The kind of smile that suggests confusion at a very simple question. "In your room," she repeated. "Your luggage, your clothes, you're sleeping in my bed." "Oh," she looked at my mother, then back at me. "Mom, I thought you explained this to her before, at the hospital." My mother's face went white, not the soft white of surprise, the white of someone who knows they're about to step into a minefield and the minefield is about to detonate. "Stephanie moved in," my mother said slowly. "Last week, while you were still hospitalized. She and Derek are having some issues and they thought it might be good for her to have some space." I looked at Stephanie. I looked at my mother. I looked back at Stephanie. "I'm sorry," Stephanie said, and she did actually sound sorry. "Derek and I got into a huge fight. You know how he gets. I just needed somewhere to stay for a bit, and Mom said it would be fine if I used your room since you were in the hospital anyway, and nobody knew how long you'd be there, and—" "This is my apartment," I said. "I know, honey, I know." Stephanie reached out and put her hand on my arm. "But I'm family. It's not like I'm a stranger, and I knew you'd want me to have somewhere safe to go." The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it comes with an apology attached. Sometimes the person doing it genuinely believes they're doing you a favor. I pulled my arm away. "I need to lie down," I said. "Of course," my mother said quickly. "Let's get you settled on the couch. Stephanie can move her things out of your room by tonight. We'll figure this out." But that's where my mother was wrong. We didn't figure it out by that night. We also didn't figure it out by the end of that week. The next morning, Stephanie knocked on my bedroom door, my bedroom that she'd taken over with coffee. She was dressed in my clothes again, the expensive cardigan, this time with my scarf tied around her neck, the scarf my father had bought me 3 years ago in Barcelona. Cashmere, hand-dyed, irreplaceable. "I thought you might want a rest," she said, handing me the coffee. "I made it the way you like it, with the almond milk extra shot of espresso." I took the coffee because I was raised to be polite. I was raised to accept gestures of kindness, even when they came wrapped in something that didn't feel kind at all. "When are you leaving?" I asked. Stephanie sat on the edge of the couch like she'd been invited. Like this was normal conversation between two sisters who hadn't just had a conversation about territory and boundaries and the basic concept of ownership. "Derek called last night," she said. "He's being a complete asshole. He said if I leave Portland, he's going to file for full custody of the kids. He's threatening to say I abandoned them." I didn't ask how he could say that when she'd been gone less than a week. I didn't point out that abandonment usually requires more than 5 days. I just listened. "I think I need to stay longer than I thought," she continued. "Maybe a few weeks. I need to talk to a lawyer. I need to figure out what my rights are. I need to be somewhere where I can think clearly without him calling every 5 minutes and telling me that I'm crazy and I'm overreacting and nobody would ever believe me anyway." Those words, "nobody would ever believe me anyway," I recognized them. I knew what they felt like. "Stephanie, I just got out of the hospital. I need quiet. I need my space to recover." "I know, honey, and you'll have that. I'm not going to bother you. I'll stay in your room. I'll keep the noise down. I'll be the perfect houseguest." "It's not about being the perfect houseguest. It's about this being my apartment, my room, my bed I need." But she was already standing up. already backing away toward my bedroom. "I know you're frustrated," she said. "I'm frustrated too, but we're family. We have to help each other. This is what family does." After she closed the door, I sat in the quiet of my living room and I drank the coffee she'd made. It was too hot. I burned my tongue and didn't stop drinking. That night, my mother called. "How are you feeling?" she asked, and I could hear guilt in every syllable. "I'm downstairs," I said, "on the couch, like I'm the guest in my own apartment." "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. I should have waited to let you know in person. I should have handled this better. But Stephanie was in such a state, and you were still in the hospital, and I didn't think." "You didn't think," I repeated. "That's the problem, isn't it?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "She's going through something very difficult," my mother said finally. "Derek has been increasingly controlling. He monitors her phone. He controls the finances. He's been isolating her from her friends. She's scared, honey. She needs help." I didn't argue. I already knew all of this about Derek. I'd known for years. I'd tried to talk to Stephanie about it 100 times, and 100 times she defended him or minimized it or explained away the things that weren't okay. That was the thing about people in bad situations. They could recognize the cage they were in, but they weren't always ready to leave it. "Just for 2 weeks," my mother said. "Please, just let her stay for 2 weeks while she talks to lawyers and figures out next steps. Then she'll go back to Derek or she'll figure out a different living situation, but she won't be here indefinitely. I promise." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my sister wouldn't take over my apartment, that my mother wouldn't have given away my space without asking, that any of this was actually temporary. But something in my chest, something that had been developing for years like a slow infection, was starting to whisper that I was not being heard, that what I wanted didn't matter, that the apartment I'd paid for with my own money, that I'd sacrificed and saved and worked overtime to afford, was somehow less important than my sister's crisis. "Okay," I said into the phone. 2 weeks. It was day one of a lie. 2 weeks turned into 3 weeks before I said anything to Stephanie directly. 3 weeks of sleeping on a couch that was too short for my body. 3 weeks of listening to her on the phone with lawyers. 3 weeks of watching her wear my clothes and use my skincare products and leave my bathroom covered in her things. 3 weeks of her apologizing constantly while never actually leaving. "I know this is hard," she'd say, appearing in my living room every morning. "Derek's lawyer is being impossible. I'm trying, I swear. I talked to someone about getting a temporary rental for the month of April, but I need to wait until I'm sure about the custody arrangements, and I need to make sure Derek doesn't think I'm trying to run away with the kids." The kids? She had 2 children, ages 5 and 7. She'd left them with Derek while she hid in my apartment, and somehow that detail was supposed to make me sympathetic. It did, actually. That was the thing that made it all so insidious. I understood why she was here. I could see the corner she'd been painted into. I could even imagine, if I tried hard enough, why she'd taken my room without permission. Because maybe having my room made her feel like she had some control in a life where she had none. But understanding something doesn't make it okay. On day 23, I found her in my closet. She wasn't searching for anything. She was trying on my blazer, the navy one with the silk lining, the one I'd bought for job interviews when I was desperate to seem like the kind of person who got hired for good jobs. "That looks great on you," she said when I appeared in the doorway. Like she hadn't been standing in my closet in my clothes without asking. Like this was normal. Like I was the one intruding on her. "It's too small for you," I said. "Just barely. I think I could lose 5 pounds and it would fit perfectly. Do you mind if I borrow it? I have a consultation with a new lawyer next week and I want to look professional and put together, and I'm not sure any of my stuff is." "You need to leave," I said. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was just trying to be clear. "Not in 2 weeks, not in 1 week. Next Monday, you need to leave next Monday." Stephanie took off the blazer slowly. I watched her fold it over her arm like it was something precious. "I can't do that," she said quietly. "You have to. This is my apartment. These are my things. I've been patient and I've been supportive and I've tried to understand that you're going through something difficult, but I also went through something difficult. I was sick for 3 weeks. I almost died. I came home to recover, and instead I'm sleeping on my couch in my own apartment while my sister sleeps in my bed and wears my clothes and uses my things like they're communal property. Stephanie set the blazer down on my bed, still made with her sheets, still smelling like her perfume. "Derek said something to me," she said, and her voice had changed. It had gone softer, more controlled, the kind of voice someone uses when they're about to say something they've been practicing. "He said that nobody would help me, that I'm too flawed, too needy, too much of a burden. He said my family wouldn't actually do anything for me when it came down to it, that we'd all abandon me eventually." I knew what she was doing. I could see the trap being set, but I also wanted to prove him wrong. "That's not true," I said, "but you're already abandoning me. A few weeks ago you were in the hospital. You were on oxygen. Your doctor said if your fever had gone any higher, if your oxygen levels had dropped any further." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I was terrified. I was so scared of losing my sister. And when you came home, I thought I could help you recover. I thought we could help each other. But now you're just trying to throw me out like I'm some kind of inconvenience. You came into my apartment without permission. You took my room. You took my bed. You're taking my clothes and my things, and you're acting like I'm the one being unreasonable. Is that what this is about? Stuff, possessions, your blazer and your bed in your apartment. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about the fact that I didn't invite you here and you never asked if you could stay and... I'm your sister. Those 4 words hung between us like something physical, like something I was supposed to automatically understand and accept and never question. "I know you are," I said, "but you're also an adult who made choices that led you here, and now you're blaming me for not fixing all of it with my space and my things and my time." Stephanie's face went very still, very calm. "Okay," she said. "Okay, you've made yourself very clear." She walked past me toward the living room. I heard her phone buzzing. I heard her moving around. When I went out to check on her, she was sitting on the couch with her laptop, her fingers moving across the keyboard with precision. "I'm looking at hotels," she announced. "I'll be out by Monday. I apologize for being such a burden." There was something in the way she said it that made my stomach drop. The kind of apology that isn't an apology. The kind of compliance that feels like surrender right before it turns into something worse. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment she decided what she was going to do to me. I found out on Monday morning. My mother called first thing, not to chat, not to see how I was recovering, but because she needed information. "Stephanie told me what you said to her," my mother began. The kind of beginning that never leads anywhere good. "What did she tell you?" "That you gave her an ultimatum. That you told her she had to leave or you didn't want to be her sister anymore." I went very still. "That's not what happened." "She's devastated, honey. She's in a vulnerable place and she came to you for help, and instead you..." "Mom, listen to what I'm telling you. That's not what happened. She moved into my apartment without permission. I asked her to leave. I gave her over a week to find somewhere else to go. I didn't say anything about not wanting to be her sister." "But you did ask her to leave." "Yes. Because it's my apartment." "And where is she supposed to go? Derek is still threatening to take her kids. She doesn't have money saved up because he's been controlling their finances. She doesn't have anywhere else. That's not my responsibility to fix." The words came out colder than I intended, but they were true. I couldn't fix my sister's problems. I couldn't hand her my life to borrow until hers got better. "Maybe not," my mother said, and there was something new in her voice, something disappointed. "But you can help. That's what family does. That's what I raised you to do." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment that I'd bought with my own money, that I'd furnished with my own taste, that I'd worked 80-hour weeks to afford, and I understood something very clearly. The rules had changed. Nobody had told me they'd changed, but they had. The rules now were, my sister's crisis was more important than my recovery. My sister's needs were more important than my boundaries. My sister's feelings were more important than my own. And if I didn't play along, I was the villain in everyone else's story. Stephanie left on Monday as promised, but she didn't go to a hotel. She went to my mother's house, which meant I got a very different version of the story than the one I'd lived through. In that version, I was the selfish one, the successful one who'd forgotten where she came from, the one who abandoned her sister at the moment she needed help most. By the end of the week, my father wasn't returning my calls. By the end of the second week, my mother had sent me a long email about how disappointing I was, how she'd raised me better than this, how family was supposed to matter more than pride. There was no mention of how Stephanie had entered my apartment without permission. No acknowledgement that I'd been compassionate and patient and eventually firm about a boundary that was mine to set. No recognition that I'd just spent 3 weeks in a hospital and deserved to come home to my own space. Instead, I was simply the woman who had hurt her sister when her sister needed help. And Stephanie never had to leave, because she got what she wanted. She'd pushed her way into my apartment, and when I pushed back, she'd rewritten the story until I was the one who looked wrong. But I was paying attention now. I started noticing things, small inconsistencies in the stories I was hearing. The way my mother would mention things that had supposedly happened while I was in the hospital, things I'd never told her about. Private conversations with Stephanie that she suddenly had detailed knowledge of, a narrative that felt rehearsed. I pulled out my old phone and scrolled back through our text conversations, looking for when the story had started, looking for the moment someone had decided to make me the enemy. March 12th, 2 days before I was discharged, a group text from my mother to my father. I've talked to Stephanie about staying with us while things with Derek settle down, but I'm also thinking that she should stay at Sarah's apartment since Sarah will be in the hospital and won't need the space. That way Stephanie can have privacy and the kids can visit without dealing with me and your father. My father had responded, probably good, gives them their own space. My mother had written, I'll tell Sarah once she's home, I'm sure she'll understand. Except she never told me, not before, not after, not until Stephanie was already moved in and wearing my clothes and sleeping in my bed. I went back further, to January, to conversations I'd missed because I was busy with my career and my life and things that seemed important before I understood how little control I actually had over my own story. January 28th, a text from Stephanie to my mother. Do you think Sarah would let me stay at her apartment? Just for a while. Derek has been insane lately, and I'm starting to feel like I can't breathe. My mother's response, let me think about how to bring it up. There it was, the moment it was decided. Not by me, not even with me, but about me and my apartment and my space like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person with a say in what happened to my own life. I should have felt angry. Instead, I felt something colder. I started collecting things, not evidence exactly, not yet, but details, dates, screenshots. The email my mother had sent me, the voicemail from my father where he said, I'm disappointed in you, Sarah. I really thought you were better than this. I worked from home while I recovered. I attended my follow-up appointments with my doctor. I went to physical therapy and slowly got stronger. And I watched my family turn me into the villain in real time, using my own apartment as the weapon. By April, Stephanie had moved out. She'd gone back to Derek. My mother called to tell me this like it was a victory, like the fact that my sister had returned to the man she'd been hiding from meant I'd somehow won. She's doing much better, my mother said brightly. She and Derek are going to couples therapy. He's promised to be more open about their finances. She feels ready to go home. I didn't ask whether Derek had actually changed or if Stephanie had simply run out of places to hide. I didn't ask what my mother had told her to make her believe going back was the right choice. I just listened and said the right things and got off the phone as quickly as I could. That night, I started the real work. I understood something now that I hadn't understood before. I understood that the system was rigged, not by courts or lawyers or anything official, but by something older and more powerful. Family loyalty, social expectation. The unspoken rule that you don't push back against people who hurt you if they're related to you. But I was intelligent, I was strategic, and I was willing to wait. I called a lawyer, not immediately. I didn't want to seem reactive. But 3 weeks after Stephanie moved out, I scheduled a consultation with a woman named Jennifer Chen who specialized in family law and financial disputes. In her office, I told her everything. I played her the voicemail from my father. I showed her the email from my mother. I explained the situation with Stephanie, and I watched Jennifer's face as she took notes. "Your concern is," she asked when I finished. "I want to understand what happened to me legally," I said. "If someone enters your home without permission and takes possession of your bedroom and your belongings, does that have implications? Could I have removed her belongings if she'd refused to leave? Do I have any recourse?" Jennifer leaned back in her chair. "Typically, family members have what's called a license to enter a family home. It's not the same as breaking and entering. However, if there was a dispute about occupancy and you explicitly told her to leave, that changes things. At that point, she becomes a trespasser, and you would have had the right to pursue removal through the courts if necessary." "And my belongings, my clothes, my things that she was using?" "That would depend on intent. If she was deliberately taking your property without permission, that could constitute theft, though family disputes complicate that. Most courts are reluctant to get involved in family theft cases. It's considered a civil matter." I nodded. I was writing this down in my mind like I was storing it in a vault, not because I wanted to sue my sister or press charges, but because I wanted to understand the rules of the game. I wanted to know what was possible, what was legal, what I could actually do if I decided to stop playing by everyone else's rules. "I also want to understand something else," I said. "If someone told lies about me to other people, if they spread false narratives about my character or my actions, what would that be?" "It depends on the severity," Jennifer said carefully. "If it's causing you quantifiable harm, if it's affecting your reputation professionally or financially, it could be defamation. But defamation is tricky. You have to prove that the statements were false, that they were made with malicious intent, and that they've caused you real damage. And if it's just my family, just spreading lies to other family members, that's harder to prove and harder to prosecute, but it's still damaging. It's called character assassination, and it's a form of emotional abuse." I felt something click into place. That was what had happened to me, not legally quantifiable, not prosecutable, but real nonetheless. My sister and my mother, whether intentionally or not, had rewritten the story of what happened in my apartment. They'd cast me as the selfish older sister, and they'd cast Stephanie as the victim, and they'd made sure everyone in my family knew this version of the truth. But here's the thing about stories. They can be rewritten. I spent the next 2 months very quietly preparing. I opened a new email account. Not a secret account, but a separate professional account where I could communicate clearly and keep records. I reached out to my father privately, not with anger or accusations, but with clarity. I sent him the timeline, the text messages, the email from my mother discussing the plan before anyone had asked me. I didn't add commentary. I didn't try to spin it. I just presented the facts and let them sit there on the page. 3 days later, my father called. "Why didn't you tell us all of this?" he asked. "Because I was sick," I said calmly. "I was recovering. I was trying to be compassionate about Stephanie's situation, but also I shouldn't have had to defend myself for having boundaries about my own apartment. Boundaries shouldn't require a legal argument." There was a long pause on the other end. "You're right," my father said finally. "I was wrong. I should have asked you directly instead of just accepting Stephanie's version." That was step 1. Step 2 was more delicate. I reached out to my mother not with accusation, but with a specific proposal. I suggested we all talk together, not a confrontation, a family conversation, about what had happened and how we could move forward. She agreed, though I could hear the wariness in her voice. We met at a restaurant on a Tuesday evening in May, neutral territory. My mother, my father, and me, not Stephanie, because this wasn't about her specifically. It was about the dynamic that had allowed what happened to happen. I want to talk about what happened in March, I began, and I could see my mother tense up. Not because I want to dredge up old pain, but because I think there's something we need to address as a family. Sarah, my mother said carefully, if this is about Stephanie. It's about all of us, I interrupted gently. Stephanie came to you asking for help. That was appropriate. You offered my apartment as a solution without asking me. That was not appropriate. When I said no, the narrative became that I was selfish and unsupportive, and nobody questioned that narrative. Nobody asked for my side of the story. My father was looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I'm not angry about helping Stephanie, I continued. I would have helped her. I might have said yes if anyone had actually asked me, but I needed to be asked. I needed my own space to be respected. And when I had a boundary, I needed that boundary to be supported, not painted as a character flaw. My mother's face went through several emotions: defensiveness, hurt, realization. I didn't realize that's how it felt, she said, but she said it slowly, like she was working through it even as she spoke. Because you didn't ask, I said. You decided what was best for everyone and you executed it. But I was one of the people affected, and nobody included me in that decision. I was trying to help, my mother said. I know, but help isn't help if it's imposed. Help is something you offer, something you ask permission for. My father reached over and put his hand on mine. You're right, he said, and I'm sorry I didn't listen to you the first time. It wasn't a huge moment. It didn't feel like the kind of thing that would change everything. But it was the beginning of change. It was the first crack in the narrative that had been built against me. Over the next few months, I followed up with my parents consistently. Not aggressively, just consistently. I'd send them articles about family boundaries. I'd mention therapy in a casual way. I'd gently push back whenever they said things that reflected the old narrative. It was exhausting work. The kind of work nobody gives you credit for because it's not visible. It's not a grand gesture. It's the slow rebuilding of trust and clarity through repeated, gentle insistence on the truth. But it worked. By August, my mother was having a different conversation with me. Not an apology exactly. She was never quite going to fully apologize, because that would require admitting she'd been wrong, but an acknowledgement. I should have communicated with you better, she said. About Stephanie, I should have asked. Yes, I said simply, you should have. I think I was trying to fix things between her and Derek before they got worse, and I wasn't thinking about how my choices affected you. No, you weren't, I agreed. But now you're thinking about it, that's what matters. With Stephanie, it was more complicated. I didn't confront her again. I didn't bring up what she'd done or how she'd manipulated the narrative. Instead, I let there be distance. Friendly distance, but distance nonetheless. When she called, I was warm but brief. When she invited me to family dinners, I went but I didn't linger. I was polite and professional and completely unattached. I was showing her, without words, that there were consequences for what she'd done. In September, I ran into her at a grocery store. She was with her kids. She looked tired. She looked like someone who'd gone back to a situation she wasn't happy in and was now dealing with the reality of that choice. Sarah, she said, and her voice had that quality that suggested she wanted to talk about something deeper. Hi, Steph, I said, and I kept moving. Wait, she said. Can we talk, like actually talk? I could have said no. I could have kept walking. But I was curious about what she might say when she was no longer surrounded by the family narrative that had protected her. We sat in my car. Her kids were with a babysitter she'd found. It was the first time in months that we'd been alone. I know I handled things badly, she said. With the apartment. I know I should have asked you before moving in, and I know I made excuses and I let Mom make excuses for me, and I'm sorry. I didn't respond immediately. I was listening for whether this was a real apology or another manipulation. Derek found out I'd been at your place, she continued. He was so angry. He said I was making a fool of him, staying with my family like he couldn't provide for me. He said I was betraying him. And so I convinced myself that it was all your fault, that if you'd just been more supportive, I wouldn't have had to come to you in the first place. that if you just let me stay longer, Derek wouldn't have been angry. I made it your fault because it was easier than admitting that my situation was my own fault. This was the thing about people. They were capable of knowing they were wrong. They were capable of changing, but only if they went through the uncomfortable process of actually examining what they'd done. I'm still not happy with you, I said quietly, but I appreciate you saying that. Is there anything I can do? She asked. I thought about that, about what would actually help, about what would actually repair something that had been broken. Yeah, I said. Stop letting Derek make your decisions. Go to therapy. Figure out who you are when nobody else is telling you who to be, and then we can rebuild this. She nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't make excuses. In October, I got a text from my mother. Stephanie is looking at apartments. She's thinking about separating from Derek. I didn't respond with celebration. I didn't respond with I told you so. I just wrote back. That's good. I hope she finds something that works for her. Because that was the thing I'd learned through all of this. Revenge isn't about making other people suffer. It's about taking back your own power. It's about refusing to be the villain in someone else's story just because they decided that's the role you'd play. It's about being so clear and so consistent in your own truth that eventually, everyone else has to adjust their version of events to match reality. I didn't need to sue Stephanie or press charges or expose her or make her regret what she'd done. I just needed to be unmoved, unshakable, present in my own story as the protagonist instead of the supporting character that everyone else had cast me as. By January of the following year, something had shifted. My father called to ask how I was doing, not because something was wrong, but because he wanted to know. Stephanie had moved into an apartment 3 miles away and was working with a lawyer to formalize a separation agreement. My mother had started seeing a therapist to work through family patterns she'd been repeating for decades. And I was living in my apartment, alone, peaceful, recovered. The pneumonia was gone. The physical effects had faded. What remained was clarity, understanding, a very specific knowledge of what I would and would not accept from people who claimed to love me. I'd won without having to fight in the way I'd initially imagined. I hadn't blown anything up. I hadn't exposed anyone or destroyed anyone. I'd simply refused to be diminished by their narrative. I'd stood firm in the truth of my own experience, and I'd waited for everyone else to catch up to reality. That was the most powerful thing I could have done. It was quiet, it was patient, it was relentless. And it worked. On a Tuesday evening in late January, I sat in my apartment with a cup of tea and I looked around at my things. My carefully chosen furniture, my books on the shelves, my record collection organized the way I liked it, my bed, dressed in sheets I'd picked out in a room that belonged only to me. It wasn't the revenge I'd imagined. It was better. It was my life, restored to myself. It was the most satisfying ending I could have possibly gotten. Not because anyone had been destroyed, but because I had been saved from the story they were trying to write me into, from the role they'd assigned me, from the diminishment of my own needs and boundaries and autonomy. I'd taken it all back. And the best part was that I'd done it without them even realizing that I was in the process of doing it.